live in interesting times. Today's stories. Hong Kong mask ban sparks violent clashes. Rail shut down. Canada's Tory leader slammed over dual U.S. citizenship. Climate change pushes Italy beekeepers to the brink. Does eating red meat increase cancer? Maybe it doesn't, says doctor. Traditional crab fishing persists in the Argentinian Patagonia. For EBC Sports, Montreal Alouettes fumble the chance to defeat the BC Lions. Greening up a southern Ontario city. Word on the street, Toronto Book and Magazine Festival. And we will take you to a museum without old stuff. I'm Marnie Aquino with Eagle News, broadcasting from our Vancouver studio, bringing you stories from around the globe. More disruption in Hong Kong. The city's mass transit rail system was suspended and dozens of banks and shopping malls closed after a ban on pro-democracy protesters wearing face masks came into effect. The move sparked widespread anger and violent clashes. Officials imposed the ban under emergency powers not used in more than half a century. It was aimed at quelling nearly 4 months of unrest, but instead it triggered mass protests and vows of defiance. A 14-year-old boy was reportedly shot and wounded. Spontaneous rallies broke out across Hong Kong after Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced the emergency law. Large crowds of office workers began blocking roads in the heart of the central commercial district. Demonstrators later vandalized subway stations, started street fires, and smashed the windows of pro-China businesses as clashes erupted throughout the evening. Police used tear gas in multiple locations to disperse protesters who had taken over roads. In the northern district of Yuen Long, a police officer opened fire when he was surrounded in his car and attacked by protesters. A patrol bomb exploded at his feet. Also in Yuen Long, the South China Morning Post quoted a medical source as saying a teenage boy was shot and wounded. It was unclear if the shooting was linked to the plainclothes officer who opened fire. The entire subway network was suspended, leaving protesters, locals, and Friday night revelers stranded. As the city awoke on Saturday, the rail network remained out of action, including the crucial airport line. The rail operator said it would assess damage to stations before deciding when to reopen lines. Shopping malls were closed and supermarket chains said they would not open. Many mainland Chinese banks, which were targeted in the violence, stayed shuttered. Police are telling people to be alert, adding fresh protests are expected. Beijing described the ban as extremely necessary. Critics say Lam's move was a major step towards authoritarianism for Hong Kong. The city has been governed by China under a one-country, two-systems framework since British colonial rule ended in 1997. Prominent democracy activist Joshua Wong says the law marks the beginning of the end of Hong Kong. In the United States, the Congressional Executive Commission on China said that using the emergency powers will not address the grievances underlying 4 months of protests. Hong Kong's protests were ignited by a now-scrapped plan to allow extraditions to the mainland, which fueled fears of an erosion of liberties promised under one country, two systems. After Beijing and local leaders took a hard line, the demonstrations snowballed into a wider movement calling for more democratic freedoms and police accountability. Protesters have used face masks to avoid identification and respirators to protect themselves from tear gas. The ban came after the worst violence of the year, when China celebrated 70 years of Communist Party rule on Tuesday. During those clashes, an officer shot and wounded a teenager, the first such shooting since the demonstrations began. The new law threatens anyone wearing masks at protests with up to 1 year in prison. The leader of Canada's Conservative Party is under fire because of his dual citizenship. Andrew Scheer is in the middle of an election campaign trying to defeat Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Now he faces questions about his dual Canadian-U.S. citizenship. On the campaign trail last week, Scheer was supposed to be touting his tough stance on crime, but his announcement was overshadowed by questions over his dual nationality. As he unveiled plans for a crackdown on gangs and illegal firearms, his audience at a Toronto news conference appeared much more interested in his heritage. In Canada, it is no impediment to high office to have roots in other countries, but Scheer has sparked anger by leaving it so late in the campaign to reveal his citizenship status. Scheer said he decided after becoming Conservative leader in 2017 to renounce his American citizenship, but he only submitted the paperwork in August, just before the election was called. Critics have also highlighted what they see as a double standard. In past elections, the Conservatives have attacked the leaders of the New Democratic Party and Liberal Party because of dual citizenship. Scheer himself in 2005 criticized the dual French-Canadian nationality of Canada's former Governor-General, Michel Jean. The Liberal campaign, meanwhile, played up the controversy to attack Scheer's plan to address rising gun violence, accusing him of wanting to bring in American-style gun laws for Canada. Scheer is proposing minimum 5-year jail terms for possession of a smuggled firearms. He says he would list gangs as criminal entities in much the same way terrorist groups. In Italy, beekeepers are feeling the sting of climate change. The unseasonal weather means the bees are not making enough honey to keep themselves alive, and that has beekeepers worried about the future. Unusual weather is wreaking havoc on bee populations, including in northern Italy, where the pollinating insects crucial to food production are struggling to survive. Italian winters have, in general, become milder and shorter. This year, just as in 2017, a warm spring arrived early, only to be followed by hailstorms and an abrupt return to lower temperatures. That has beekeeper Riccardo Polide concerned.
In ogni caso, forse quest'anno per la prima volta ci siamo scontrati con un problema in termini drammatici. Non stiamo parlando soltanto di una produzione scarsa o di una produzione più ridotta rispetto a ciò che consideriamo normale in ogni zona, ma stiamo parlando di quantitativi irrisori di miele che non bastavano neppure per la sopravvivenza delle famiglie di api.
A bitter blend of increased pesticide use, falling prices due to foreign competition, and climate change has hit keepers hard in recent years. Like many others whose livelihood depends on the buzzing insects, Polide had to feed his colony fructose-based syrups in this year to make sure they did not die of hunger. Beekeeper Lidia Agnello is also feeling the effects.
Quest'anno le produzioni sono state scarse anche pur facendo nomadismo, che significa spostare le api sulle fioriture e magari anche sulla stessa fioritura come l'acacia, spostarlo, inseguire la scalarità della fioritura per riuscire a aumentare i raccolti. Però nonostante si sia tentato di andare in più postazioni, in più posti proprio per cercare di ottimizzare il raccolto, non c'è stata produzione.
She and her husband tried moving their hives several times to follow the flowers as they bloomed, but that failed, and this year's honey harvest has been their worst yet. Samuel Colota, head of the local association of honey producers, say beekeepers in Italy have seen repeated poor harvests over the past 7 years. Bees are also being poisoned by pesticides, while increases in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere affect nectar production. The mass import of foreign honey, particularly from China, has driven down prices, meaning Italian producers struggle to make enough profit to cover their costs. There is currently no European legislation requiring sellers to specify the origin of honey, and many beekeepers say Chinese blends are adulterated by being cut with syrup. The government has been asked to declare a natural disaster so beekeepers can benefit from aid, such as a moratorium on loan repayments. Agnello and Polid both managed to produce other types of honey this summer aside from acacia, but those harvests were disappointing. Polid's total honey production came to less than 10 kilos per hive compared to some 60 kilograms previously. He keeps his head above water by breeding and selling queen bees needed to establish new colonies, but if the sector remains in crisis, that income stream will also be threatened. Polid says the EU should do more to protect beekeepers and consumers from those who dress inferior honeys up as the real thing. But despite their stress and hard work, he says there was no question of him giving up. Still to come, does eating red meat increase cancer? Maybe it doesn't, says a doctor. Crabbing the old-fashioned way in Argentina. And for EBC Sports, the Montreal Alouettes fumble the chance to defeat the BC Lions. This is Eagle News. You're watching Eagle News. In Puerto Almanza, a small port in the extreme south of Argentina, the southern king crab is still fished following traditional methods. This is a way to protect the coveted species and increase the income of fishermen by offering tourists the chance to taste the gastronomic delicacy on the spot.
Esto lo que nos genera, por un lado, es la posibilidad de que durante la época de turismo podamos tener como familias una nueva alternativa de ingreso, ¿no es cierto?, económico. Las casas son pequeñas, con pocos lugares y es un objetivo común de que no aumenten esos lugares. De esa manera también el recurso que se saca va a ser suficiente para los pequeños lugares que tenemos y no va a ser necesario hacer un esfuerzo más grande que perjudique a las especies.
No, la centolla es la vedette que tenemos nosotros acá en el canal, es un cangrejo, el king crab. Es un producto que es maravilloso, no es comparable con el que está en Alaska. Esto es mucho más sutil, no es tan dulce, aquel otro es mucho más dulce.
Is red meat unhealthy? Maybe not after all. Cutting back on red meat is standard medical advice to prevent cancer and heart disease, but a review of dozens of studies has concluded that the potential risk is low and evidence uncertain. Dr. Gordon Guyat of McMaster University says the jury is still out.
Maybe meat consumption increases cancer and cardiovascular disease, but maybe it doesn't. Furthermore, the evidence available suggests that if it does increase cancer and cardiovascular disease, and it may not, the magnitude of the increase is very small.
In new guidelines published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, a panel of researchers from 7 countries suggests that adults continue current unprocessed red meat consumption. The scientists added adults should also continue current processed meat consumption. The research shows reducing red meat consumption by 3 servings per week could lower cancer mortality by 7 deaths per 1,000 people. Researchers say any such decline was modest and that they had found only a low degree of certainty about the statistics. They add that the quality of evidence linking processed meat with cardiovascular diseases and diabetes was very low. The researchers say they want to change the old school approach of giving general nutritional recommendations and to bring more focus on evidence of individual benefit. Guyat says individual preferences should also play a role.
I would believe that public health guidelines should not neglect completely quality of life and the satisfaction that people get out of eating their red meat. So the population health folks tend, understandably, to focus on lives extended or strokes prevented or cancer prevented, but that's not the only issue. To me, people's quality of life also matters.
But eating less red meat and processed meat has been a cornerstone of dietary guidance for decades in many countries and from leading health groups. The World Health Organization International Agency for Research on Cancer says that processed meat is carcinogenic, while red meat is probably carcinogenic. In response to the latest guidelines, the World Cancer Research Fund said it would not change its advice. The BC Lions take on the Montreal Alouettes in a dramatic game at BC Place. Eagle News correspondent Zsolti Horvath with the report.
The BC Lions defeated the Montreal Alouettes 25-23 in a dramatic game at BC Place Stadium. With 1 minute left in the game, the Alouettes elected to go for it on 3rd down and 1 from the 5-yard line instead of kicking a chip shot field goal that would have won them the game. Montreal, who were already down to their backup quarterback due to the suspension of their starter, drove down the field with under 3 minutes left to play. Instead of kicking the field goal that would win the game, they sent their third-string quarterback to run a quarterback sneak to try and get the first down. Unfortunately for Montreal, BC's defense was firing on all cylinders and forced a fumble while ultimately causing a turnover. Montreal head coach Kahari Jones talks about his decision not to kick the field goal with 1 minute left.
Yeah, I would have done that in any situation. We've been really good on our 3rd and 1s to that point. With the time left on the clock, to give a guy like Mike Riley that kind of time with needing 1 point. Thought that was going to be a little tough too, but I felt really comfortable with the call, and I'd call it again. Just fun.
Lions quarterback Mike Riley had an almost perfect performance as he went 30 for 34 passing for 309 yards and a touchdown. When the game was on the line, it was clear who Riley's most trusted receiver was, as Brian Burnham caught 7 passes for 77 yards and a crucial touchdown. Burnham talks about his relationship on the field with his quarterback.
He trusts me. I'm willing to go out there and put my body on the line and make the plays that need to be made. And that's every day in practice. We're going through those situations every day in practice.
Despite the loss, the Alouettes remain comfortable sitting in 2nd place in the East and are almost a lock for the playoffs. For the Lions, who are the hottest team in the league right now after winning their last 3 games, they have 4 remaining games on their schedule that will determine if they make the postseason. Zsolti Horvath, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Up next, greening up a southern Ontario city. Word on the Street, a Toronto Book and Magazine Festival, and a museum that features nothing old. You're watching Eagle News. This is Eagle News. I'm Arnie Aquino. In Southern Ontario, members of a church group are putting down some roots. As Eagle News correspondent Angel Cacho reports, this congregation of the Church of Christ hopes their tree planting efforts will improve the quality of the neighborhood.
The Church of Christ in Southern Ontario joins the city's effort to plant trees in the hopes of improving the neighborhood's quality of life.
We're here today planting trees, so thank you so much for coming and helping us make Mississauga a better place.
We learned this in high school, that trees gives oxygen, and oxygen is needed to live. So this kind of activity is really very important. And this is in line also with the present church administration's campaign to intensify all the works in the church, and that includes CFO activities. This is an activity of the CFO of Southern Ontario.
So yeah, first I'd just like to thank Church of Christ for coming out today to plant 400 trees in Lake Aquitaine Park.
The importance of planting trees really is to better the environment and better the people that live there. So in the city of Mississauga, we have a lot of beautiful natural areas. We also have a lot of parking lots, roads, and concrete spaces, more urban spaces that definitely can contribute to a heating effect called urban heat island effect. So it's really important that we're adding trees to the local environment in Mississauga to help cool the atmosphere here locally, and also on a global scale to try to combat climate change. So just thank you for being here, for helping your community. I love to see groups come out and just dedicate their time towards helping the environment, helping the people in their community, and the Church of Christ is definitely doing that by being here today.
In conjunction with its volunteer services, helping improve the environment is one of the many events sponsored by the Church of Christ. Reporting from Lake Aquitaine in Mississauga, Ontario, for Eagle News, I am Angel Cacho, 1 with 25.
Word on the Street is in Harbourfront Centre. The Outdoor Book and Magazine Festival once again comes back to Toronto. Eagle News correspondent Riza Mangilit for the report.
Best-selling author Neil Gaiman once said, "A book is a dream you hold in your hands." If that's the case, then this weekend Toronto is filling up with hundreds of dreams, as today the city holds the Word on the Street Festival, an annual and national celebration of books and magazines, of writing and reading.
The Word on the Street Festival is an annual outdoor festival that hosts Canadian authors and writers and a marketplace that features books and magazines published here in Canada. This year, the festival is held here at the beautiful Harbourfront Centre, closing off the summer season with best offerings of the Canadian publishing industry. The WOTS Festival celebrates its 30th anniversary with its biggest features to date: 200 Canadian authors, 120 events, 16 stages, and 265 exhibitors. The festival program includes children's literature and activity tents, Indigenous author readings, writing workshops, panel talks, and Canada's largest marketplace of books and magazines.
We've actually been attending Word on the Street for many years. I want to say close to a decade, probably, that we've been coming. It's a great way, as an independent publishing house especially, to be able to put ourselves in front of the readers and introduce our books to them. So my husband actually founded the press, and he is a poet, and he realized when he looked out into the Canadian publishing landscape that there wasn't a lot of presses that were publishing poetry or work that was of a more experimental nature, and so that's why he was prompted to start the press. And this year we're actually celebrating our 15th anniversary. Oh, well, it's great. I mean, it's definitely an industry that has many challenges, as do many industries, I realize, but it's a very exciting time as well, though, in Canadian literature, I think, especially as there's been a lot of movement in the last few years to publish more broadly, publish voices that have been historically underrepresented in our publishing landscape, and our press is really committed to that. And so I've been very excited to see the growth of that across the industry, and I'm really happy to be able to contribute to that as well. I think one of the biggest challenges as an independent publisher we face is discoverability. I mean, there is just a lot out there, and how do you bring dialogue, discussion, or attention to your books? So that discoverability factor is an ongoing challenge, but one that we certainly try to rise to. Yeah, and I think that that's probably something that most independent presses would agree with.
According to the WOTS, their mission is simple: to create a free public festival celebrating reading and literacy in Toronto. For 30 years, this is what the festival has exactly done and continues to do. This year, the WOTS Festival features celebrated Canadian authors such as M.G. Basanji, Maureen Jennings, and Cory Doctorow, and upcoming authors like Casey Plett, Alicia Elliott, and Sherry Demeline.
Storytelling is universal, which makes reading and writing vital in human lives. In Toronto, Raza Mangirit, Eagle News, I'm one with 25.
Usually, museums are associated with old things from the past. While visiting Tacoma, Washington, Eagle News correspondent Thomas I. Likeness found a museum of the young where you can see the future, or at least the people of the future.
Children's museums. They're principally an American phenomenon. They've been around for about 120 years now, the first ones beginning in Boston and New York. There are several located in larger cities in the U.S. There are none in Canada, although there are a couple of science explore spaces. How does a children's museum differ from the ones adults go to? Well, first, you're allowed to touch things, to play with things, and the atmosphere is informal. The whole idea is for kids to learn through play, according to Kate Stafford, the manager of the Children's Museum in Tacoma, Washington. Stafford says they believe it's a child's right to have the opportunity to play, adding, "This is how we learn." She says skills learned through play take a shorter time to master. Come to think of it, adults do the same thing. We just call them hobbies. Amiel Saul, his wife Jay, and their children dropped by the museum on this Saturday afternoon. He says they found out about it during his time in the Army.
Actually, while I was still in the military, we have this community that we share about places to go with our family. And this is one of the most place to visit with kids.
Because of the large number of military families visiting the museum, plans are underway to establish a satellite location at the nearby Lewis McChord military base by next summer. Saul adds the museum has been a great help for his children.
We're really thankful for the community that they're creating for the kids, especially for the kids growing up, and us being from the Philippines, not having the community like this for the kids to grow up and develop their skills, art skills, motor skills, and socialize with other kids.
The Tacoma Museum is unique. It's the only one in the U.S. that has no admission charge. Manager Stafford says they don't want finances to stand in the way of child development. Patrons are asked to donate what they can, and for those who wish, memberships can be purchased. The museum in Tacoma serves about 200 kids a day. You're never too old to be young. In Tacoma, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News, I'm one with 25.
That is this week's Eagle News. Join us next week for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I am Arnie Aquino. I am one with 25.